Artillery is defined as large caliber guns used in warfare on land. During World War I, artillery pieces were essentially huge cannons that fired explosive rounds against enemy positions, causing enormous damage to men, equipment, and the landscape. Having an advantage on artillery meant having an advantage on war, as artillery caused the loss of several lives. High explosive shells are packed with as much explosive as possible, making them better for destroying inanimate objects. A typical French gun fired a 75mm shell. Shrapnel rounds were designed to kill infantry. They had a small charge surrounded by metal balls, and the explosion sent the metal flying into flesh. Artillery during World War I ranged from light to heavy. Light artillery, also called field artillery, generally looked old-fashioned, with pieces small enough to be drawn by horses and brought close to the front lines. They were sturdier, more powerful, and sometimes lighter than their predecessors. This artillery was placed at the same level as the opponent and accompanied infantry and cavalry formations on the front. In general, the artillery was limited in weight, though moving large artillery guns became difficult, if not impossible, in ragged or muddy areas. Heavy artillery, opposite of field artillery, was organized at levels above the opponent. They were able to hurl shells miles across the countryside, allowing artillerists to strike their enemy while safely out of danger from their targets. In their extreme form, they led to weapons like the Big Bertha guns and the Austro-Hungarian Skoda howitzers that smashed Belgian fortresses in opening battles of the war. One example of a weapon used during the war was the howitzer. The howitzer originated in Imperial Germany and was used by Belgium, Nazi Germany, and Imperial Germany. It required 6 people to operate it and was 8.2 feet long and weighed 2 tons. The howitzer was a mortar-style weapon with upward-angled barrels, and it fired at an arch to hit the enemy from above. It was able to fire between 4 and 5 rounds per minute. A super heavy siege howitzer nicknamed Big Bertha was created and used by Germany. It was a 96,000-pound or 43-ton system that could launch 1,800-pound shells nearly 8 miles at a 419mm projectile. The Paris gun was also used by Germany during World War I. It was a 69-foot barrel that sat on top of a special railway car, and it required a crew of 80 specialists and assistants. The Paris gun allowed Germany to shoot man-made projectile up to 26 miles into the air. It made use of a 234-pound projectile and held a range of 81 miles. From within Germany-held territory in France, the gun was able to target Paris, which was about 75 miles away. Improvements were made to the artillery during World War I, including a higher rate of fire and higher artillery concentration. Armies had lines of guns all firing at the same time to increase their power and success. Corporal Barthès was a French soldier during World War I. He was a barrel maker from France and lived a good life with his wife and 2 sons before the war began. The Great War started in August of 1914, and in November, Barthès had taken his place in the Western Front. He had stayed in the army for 54 months, 41 of which consisted of fighting on the front lines. War was never safe, but Barthès managed to survive the worst of trench warfare. He knew he cheated death multiple times. I was by myself, at the far end of our little stretch of trench, crocheting in a little hole when a big shell landed like a thunderbolt just 3 or 4 meters in front of me. Artillery was and still is a deadly weapon that stole the lives of hundreds of soldiers. They ranged from light to heavy and included a large variety of guns, such as the howitzer, the Paris gun, and Big Bertha. These weapons were improvements of their predecessors, and they led to more improvements in artillery during later wars that vastly helped in the war effort.
The thing goes grrrr, pop, pop, tap, tap, tap. Skitty, kit, pop, pop, and the poop, poop, boom. Skia, boom, 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 boom.